What if the fear that has been shaping your decisions, limiting your choices, keeping you inside a smaller version of your life than you actually want? What if that fear was not based on something that happened to you? What if it was based on something you imagined? Something your mind constructed so completely, so vividly, so many times that it became indistinguishable from memory. A fear built not from experience but from anticipation. Not from what occurred but from what your brain decided was likely to occur. And what if that constructed fear has been treated as real evidence this whole time? Treated as a legitimate warning about what the world contains, when it was never anything more than your own mind talking to itself in the dark. Because that is one of the most common and least discussed ways fear operates. Not the fear that comes from something that actually hurt you. The fear that comes from something you imagined vividly enough, repeated internally often enough, that your nervous system stopped caring about the distinction between the imagined and the real. Both feel the same. Both produce the same tightening, the same avoidance, the same shrinking of what feels possible. And if nobody ever tells you which kind of fear you're dealing with, you spend years protecting yourself from something that only ever existed inside your own head. Here's how to tell the difference. And here's what to do once you can. Fear that comes from real experience has a source you can point to. Something happened. Something painful or frightening or genuinely threatening, and the fear that formed was a direct response to that specific event. That kind of fear is the nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do, learning from experience and generating a warning when similar circumstances appear. It is a reasonable, proportional, earned response to something real. Fear that you created is different. It has a feeling of certainty but not a clear origin. When you try to trace it back to a specific event that justifies its size, you find either nothing, or something much smaller than the fear itself, or a chain of imaginings. One worried thought that led to a scenario that led to a conclusion that led to a belief, that at some point lost contact with anything that actually happened and became entirely self-generated. And self-generated fear is not less real in how it feels. It is less real in what it's pointing at. It feels exactly like the other kind. The body responds the same way. The avoidance impulse is just as strong. The sense of genuine danger is just as convincing. But the danger is not there. The warning is accurate to nothing in your actual current environment. It is a fire alarm going off in a building that is not on fire, because the alarm was calibrated to a smoke signal that your own mind produced. Here is how the mind builds this kind of fear. And the process is so ordinary, so quiet, so completely unannounced that most people have no idea it's happening while it's happening. It starts with one thought. An uncertain situation, a gap in information, a moment where the outcome is not yet known. And the mind, which does not sit comfortably in uncertainty, begins to fill the gap. It generates a possibility, a version of how this could go. And the version it generates is rarely the neutral one. It is weighted toward the threatening one, because a brain calibrated for survival finds uncertain gaps more compatible with danger than with safety. So the possibility arrives. And it is uncomfortable enough that it gets attention. And attention makes things more vivid. And vividness makes them feel more real. And the more real the possibility feels, the more the body responds to it as if it were actual. The stress response activates slightly. The muscles contract slightly. And the brain, noticing the body's response, interprets it as evidence. Something must be genuinely threatening here, because look at how the body is reacting. And now the thought has bootstrapped itself into something that feels like knowledge. The possibility has become a probability. The probability has become an expectation. The expectation has become the basis for decisions. And the decisions, the avoidances, the pullbacks, the limits placed on what feels possible, reinforce the fear by confirming that the thing being avoided was dangerous enough to require avoidance. All of it generated internally. All of it self-sustaining. None of it requiring anything from the actual world to keep running. Here is the first intervention. Simple and immediate. The question that interrupts the self-generated fear is not, is this fear rational? Because the fear will have answers to that. The fear is good at defending its own rationality. The question that actually interrupts it is, when did I last test this? Not when did I last think about it. When did I last actually put myself in the situation the fear is warning me away from and find out what actually happens? When did I last get real information from the real world, rather than updating my prediction from inside my own head? Because self-generated fear can only survive in the absence of real data. Real data, actual experience of the thing that was being avoided, almost always contradicts the fear's predictions. Not always pleasantly. Sometimes the thing is genuinely hard, but almost never as hard as the imagined version, and almost never in the same way as the imagined version. The actual experience contains surprises. Information the fear's simulation didn't have. Capacities in you that the fear's model of you didn't account for. When you test the fear in the real world, you stop updating your prediction from inside your own head and start updating it from actual experience. And actual experience is almost always less threatening than the self-generated version. Almost always. Which means almost every test provides information that should reduce the fear. And reduced fear is a nervous system that has been shown, in the only language it trusts, that the warning it was generating was louder than what the territory actually required. Here is the second thing. And this one goes deeper. Self-generated fear has a specific relationship with identity that makes it particularly hard to leave. The fear, having been present long enough, stops feeling like a response and starts feeling like a characteristic. Like something that describes you. I am someone who doesn't do well in that kind of situation. I am someone who can't handle that kind of thing. I am someone for whom this is just too much. And once the fear has been integrated into how you understand yourself, leaving it feels like losing something rather than gaining something. It feels like becoming a different person. And even when the person you would become without the fear would be freer and more capable and more able to access the life you actually want, the change feels threatening because change to the self feels threatening regardless of the direction. This is why information alone doesn't dissolve self-generated fear. You can know intellectually that the fear is not based on anything real and still feel it completely. Because the fear is not just a prediction about the world. It has become part of your story about yourself. And the story about yourself is not changed by information. It is changed by experience that contradicts it. By doing the thing the fear said you couldn't do and discovering that you could. Not perfectly. Not without discomfort. But enough. Enough to create a crack in the story. Enough to introduce a different version of who you might be. That crack is everything. Because once the story has a crack, it can be revised. And a revised story about yourself is a self that is no longer organized around the fear that was false to begin with. There is one more thing I want to name because it is the part that keeps self-generated fear running even after people have understood everything I've just said. The fear feels protective. Even when you know it isn't based on anything real, even when you can trace its construction and see how the mind built it from imagination rather than experience, it still feels like it is doing something important. Like it is keeping you safe from something. And removing it feels reckless, like deciding to stop looking both ways before crossing a road. But here is the honest question. Safe from what, specifically? What has the fear actually protected you from? Not what you imagine it protected you from. What are the specific, actual instances where this particular fear prevented a specific harm that would otherwise have occurred? For most self-generated fears, the honest answer is, nothing that can actually be named. The protection was protection from the discomfort of the fear itself. Avoidance felt safer than exposure because exposure felt threatening. But the threat was the fear's own prediction, which was never tested, which was never contradicted by real experience because the avoidance prevented the real experience from occurring. The fear created the danger. The avoidance confirmed the danger. And the confirmation fed the fear. A loop with no external input, running entirely on its own output, having convinced you somewhere along the way that it was protecting you from something real when it was only ever protecting you from the information that would have ended it. You created this fear. That is not a criticism. It is the most useful thing you can know about it. Because what the mind creates, the mind can revise. Not by deciding to feel differently. Not by telling yourself the fear is irrational and expecting that to be enough. But by doing the specific thing that gives the nervous system what it has been missing. Real data. From the real world. From the actual experience of the situation the fear has been warning you away from. From the discovery, available only on the other side of the avoidance, that you are more capable than the fear's model of you ever accounted for. The fear is still holding you. Not because it is stronger than you. Because it has not been tested. Because the test would require walking toward the thing the fear built itself around, with full knowledge that the fear is self-generated, with a breath that signals the nervous system that the activation level can come down, with the honest recognition that the danger that was predicted has a track record of not arriving the way the prediction insisted it would. You made this fear. In the dark. From imagination and repetition, and the particular way your mind fills gaps with threat. You made it so well that it feels like something that was done to you. Like something the world produced. Like evidence of genuine danger. It was never any of those things. It was always just you, talking to yourself, in the absence of the real information that would have told you something different. Go get the real information. It has been waiting the whole time on the other side of the avoidance. And what it contains is not what the fear promised. It contains you, handling it, which you were always going to be able to do.